fans and frenemies. Today's topic isn't super on brand for me, but it's something I think is important and that more people should know about. A little while ago I spoke about it on Twitter and realized how many people just didn't know what it is. So today I want to tell you about dyscalculia, how to know if you have it, and what to do if you do. First things first, what is dyscalculia? Well, it's a little bit like dyslexia for numbers. Dyscalculia is often referred to as a mathematics learning disorder, and it's characterized by a difficulty with understanding number sense and associating the meaning of a number with the symbol of a number. For example, if you have dyscalculia, you might have had difficulty learning to count in the correct order. I've had several opportunities to try and learn new languages throughout my life, a few years of French and Spanish in school, and then living in China for a year, but for some reason, the number 7 specifically is always extraordinarily difficult for me to remember, and I always skip it when I count. It can make memorizing new symbols associated with a number difficult too. Most people with dyscalculia find it really difficult to read the face of an analog clock, and I know I don't like playing a game called Shadowrun with my friends because it involves rolling large amounts of dice and counting how many of them landed on a 5 or a 6, and I find that really difficult to do. When I see lots of things to be counted, especially surrounded by things to not count, it makes my head swim. And if the dice uses dots instead of actual numbers, it makes it almost impossible. A lot of the time I have to ask for help, even counting small amounts of dice under 10, because I'll lose track within 3. Dyscalculia is also marked by really poor working memory. Now, as you might imagine, there's different ways your brain remembers things, and the term working memory refers to your ability to hold information in your active memory during a thought process. Sort of like if you copy a paragraph of text, until you paste it, it's something you're holding on to paste later. When doing math, you might do one calculation that requires you to do several smaller calculations, and your working memory is where you hold that information while it waits to be used in the next calculation. When I was 17, I had some testing done, and one of the working memory tests I was given was to name as many animals as I could in 60 seconds. It sounds really easy, and I managed to shoot over 10 or 11 animals very quickly in the first few seconds, but then suddenly, I couldn't pull any more names out of my brain. I couldn't remember what I had already said, and I had only named 2 or 3 more. It was pretty bad. To fully appreciate how bad my working memory is, the way a standard IQ test works, a score of 100 is meant to represent the average person's ability level, and my IQ tested at the time at 132. An IQ is an average of scores for a variety of different intelligence and test scores. My score of working memory, specifically, was 71, a full 61 points behind my IQ. That is abysmal. A score like that, where the number is wildly different from how I scored in other areas, was a clear indication that something was not right. The next important question to answer is, do you have dyscalculia? Well, maybe. Does any of this sound familiar to you? It's completely possible you have undiagnosed dyscalculia. This math learning disorder actually affects 7 to 9% of Americans, but is notoriously underdiagnosed. If you have ever found yourself consistently struggling with math your whole life, perhaps lagging behind your peers, or specifically behind how you do in other subjects, you might be affected by a learning disorder. Even if you don't believe that you're affected by dyscalculia, it's something important to know about, because with so many people affected by this disorder, and it being so unlikely to be diagnosed, it's not impossible that you know someone with dyscalculia, undiagnosed or not. If you know the symptoms, you might be able to help a friend or a family member by letting them know it might be something to look into if you see signs that sound like dyscalculia. So, what if you do have dyscalculia? What do you do then? Well, the number one thing to do is stop torturing yourself. It's okay to find ways to accommodate yourself and make life easier. When I was in middle school, I was so embarrassed over my inability to read an analog clock that I wore an analog watch every day and refused to get a digital one because I felt like people would assume if I were wearing a digital watch, it would be because I couldn't read a real one, and that was something to be ashamed of. Don't do stuff like this. You only make life harder than it needs to be. Use digital clocks, replace your dot-faced die with number-faced dice, and be willing to ask for help if something is hard. Not to mention, if you are diagnosed with dyscalculia by a doctor and you live in the United States, you are entitled to accommodations as per the Americans with Disabilities Act. If you're a young person, especially if you're struggling in school, and you have diagnosed dyscalculia, you are legally entitled to be given extra time on math tests, to tutoring, to be allowed to use a calculator in certain no-calculator tests. In my experience, schools may even be willing to excuse you from mathematics courses above a certain level if your disability is severe enough. Each person's accommodations are different, but it's help you deserve and have a right to. So if you think you might have this, I strongly recommend speaking with a doctor or a school counselor or a parent to talk about it. You deserve to be given the best opportunity to succeed, and sometimes that means needing a little extra help if something is harder for you than it is for other people. So that is about all I've got for you today on this one. As you probably picked up, dyscalculia is something I was diagnosed with during my senior year of high school when it was too late to receive any accommodations, which was unfortunate because I believe they really might have helped me. I struggled so much with mathematics as a child and as a teenager, and the guilt that went on with that struggle severely affected me. I am happy to share a little information on this extremely common but poorly known disability, and I hope that it helps you recognize symptoms in yourself, a loved one, or just helps you understand how someone else might interact differently with the world than you do, and appreciate that about them. That's all for this time, folks. Nader's out!